Hello, White Bear Leadership Academy. This is Pete. I just want to do a quick check-in session with you tonight. So get your pen and paper out, get your calendar out. Hopefully I can run through a few things that'll be helpful for you. First of all, I just kind of want to remind you of all of the sessions that we've gone through so far this year. First thing is the fact that we talked about Pat Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. Remember, we talked about the fact that, first of all, if you don't have trust, you don't have very much, because if you don't have trust, you can't engage in the second dysfunction, which is a lack of conflict. So conflict can actually be a good thing. So if you don't have trust, you can't have conflict. And if you don't have conflict, it's really hard to develop commitment. And if you can't get commitment, it's really hard to hold people accountable to stuff, because people can just say, well, I never committed to that. And it's really hard to hold people to what you think you need to do to become a better organization. And then finally, if you can't hold people accountable, well, how are you ever going to get results? At the end of that 5 dysfunction session, we kind of gave some ideas on how to create a plan or a path for your group. And remember, after that, you checked in with Mr. Herman and you had a good conversation about what your plan was, what your path was. Then remember, we talked all about mental toughness and how we have to really work on letting things go and not taking things too seriously, so that we can free up our brain for moving forward. And that's really what mental toughness is to be able to perform at a high level even when sometimes bad things happen. Then again, you had another check-in session with Mr. Herman, and you might remember that during that check-in session, you had a really good talk about kind of what your mission statement or what your purpose statement was for your group, or maybe even a little bit more in depth, like what is your purpose statement in life? And the last time we met, we talked all about the idea of locus of control. Remember, we said that some people think that the events that control their life are located outside of them. Those people have an external locus of control, meaning they think that they can't control anything. They're controlled by everything around them. Then we have people that have more of an internal locus of control. Those are the people who feel like they can influence things. And one of the things we said is that leaders typically have more of an internal locus of control, because they actually believe that they can influence the events around them and help to influence people in a positive way. Then we kind of talked about how to reframe problems so that people feel differently about the obstacles that inevitably come up when you're trying to strive for greater things. There are always going to be these inevitable problems, and our goal as leaders is to help people feel okay with those problems and maybe even help reframe them in such a way that they feel more empowered. And one of the things that we said was, let's look at a single problem that we sometimes run into and how we can reframe it. And one of the things I say all the time is, if you're not looking at a problem in the way that is empowering for you, you're probably not going to do very much about it. So, a really good example of that would be somebody says, well, I'm a procrastinator, right? And they might say, well, I generally don't do my homework right when it's assigned. and then it gets to the point where I kind of put it off a little bit too long, and then I don't have enough time to get it done, and so then I don't turn in a quality assignment, and that affects my grades, and that ultimately is going to affect my life. So the question then becomes, well, why is it that you don't do your homework on time? Why do you consistently not do your homework on time? And one of the things that I generally believe is that the reason you don't do your homework on time or right away is because you associate in your brain, you associate more pain with doing the homework than you do with not doing the homework. So you kind of think, well, if I do the homework, it's going to take away from my, sitting around time. It's going to take away from my hanging out with my friends time. It might even take away from my, reading my Twitter feed time, or whatever the case may be, right? So one of the things you have to do is you have to sort of make new associations, and you have to really focus on what are some of the reasons why you should do your homework quicker, like when it's assigned, okay? So remember that we said that ultimately there's 4 questions that if you can get to the root of these 4 questions, you can sort of reframe anything that you have going on in your life. Okay, so here would be the first question. The first question is, what pain do you think you will experience if you do your homework right away, right? We are programmed as human beings to avoid pain. And so if we think that homework is going to be pain, we're not going to do it, right? The other side of that coin is, what pleasure are you getting out of not doing your homework? So for example, you might, like I said, you might be saying, well, it takes a lot of time, so instead I'd rather hang out with my friends. I'd rather, go bowling, whatever it takes to get out of doing your homework. The other side of that now is you got to think about what would be some of the benefits of doing your homework on time. And what I say is sometimes it's actually instructive to look at sort of the negative side effects of putting your homework off, of being a procrastinator. What are those negative side effects? In other words, what pain are you going to experience if you are always procrastinating with regard to your homework, right? Well, for one thing, like we said, you put things off and then you end up not having enough time, and then you're turning in some work that's not very high quality, you're doing it in a rush, you're not really learning as much as you should. So ultimately, you're going to experience a high level of pain. And ultimately, then the other question you got to ask is, what pleasure could you experience if you would do your homework immediately? And of course, you can come up with all kinds of things. Well, of course, I'd probably turn in a higher quality homework assignment, or maybe if I did it right away, I wouldn't have to worry about it. It wouldn't cause me so much stress, right? So you got to think about all the pain that you're going to experience if you don't do your homework on time, and all the pleasure you're going to experience if you do your homework on time. Procrastination with homework is just an example, right? No matter what the problem is, if you reframe it using those 4 questions, we're going to check in with Mr. Herman on December 10th. And the most important thing that you have to remember, and again, he'll have lunch for you. It'll be 11 o'clock in the auditorium, just like it always is. But the most important thing that he wants to talk with you about that day is, what have you been learning from your experience in the Leadership Academy? Probably a good idea to write those things down. In fact, what you really need to be doing right now is kind of asking yourself this: what good has come out of your experiences in this Become Worth Following program? What good have you been able to do as a leader? And hopefully you can just kind of keep your eye on that over the next couple of weeks and just be thinking, okay, what am I doing as a positive role model and a positive influence in my group and in my school? The next time we get together, I have a little homework for you. I have a little homework between now and then for you, and that is simply that I would like for you to read this little book that I wrote, and it's called Worth Following: 7 Parables That All Leaders Need to Know. I'd like to talk about that the next time we get together. So if you weren't at our last meeting, you didn't get that packet, or the book, I should say. So when you get a chance, stop down, see Mr. Herman. He's got plenty of copies of that book for you. He'll give it to you, and if you could just make sure that you read it. It's a real quick read. I mean, it's probably about 25, 30 pages, but it's really quick. It's actually written at kind of a 8th, 9th grade level. It's sort of written probably below your level, but I just thought it'd be good for you guys to read it and just kind of reflect on it and hopefully use it in your endeavors as a leader. So stop down, see Mr. Herman, grab the Become Worth Following book. And again, like we always say, this leadership stuff can be confusing, it can be challenging. Our hope is that you can use some of the things that you're learning here to make it less confusing for you, less stressful for you, and actually more of a positive experience so that you can go out into the world and someday take this whole world by storm. Anyway, if you get confused, just remember kind of my tagline, and that is just, be the leader that you yourself would follow. Just be worth